Omar sat at the long mahogany desk inside the Senate chamber, her pen twirling idly between her fingers. The hearing room was packed that day, with reporters stacked in the back rows like vultures waiting for scraps, cameras glinting under the overhead lights, and aides scribbling notes at lightning speed. It was one of those sessions that wasn't meant to be anything more than political theater, a back-and-forth exchange between senators, a few soundbites to be clipped for cable news. But no one in that room knew it would become a moment etched into political history. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, known for his sharp tongue and folksy quips, was presiding over the hearing. The agenda was simple: debate over a controversial spending bill that had both parties sharpening their knives. But when Kennedy began his remarks, he barely got through his first sentence before Representative Ilhan Omar, sitting across from him as a witness for the minority party, smirked and then broke into laughter. At first, it was just a chuckle. The kind you might expect when someone makes a small slip of the tongue or mispronounces a word. But Omar didn't stop. Her chuckle grew into a full-bodied laugh, her shoulders shaking, her hand covering her mouth as if she was trying, but not too hard, to restrain herself. The laughter echoed in the chamber, bouncing off the marble walls. The aides sitting behind her exchanged nervous glances. Kennedy paused mid-sentence, raised an eyebrow, and waited. But she didn't stop. The laugh stretched into a full 5 minutes, an eternity in a room designed for formality. The sound filled the air while Kennedy stood silent, his patience visibly tested. Cameras zoomed in on Omar, capturing every second. By the second minute, reporters were whispering. By the third, even her allies looked uncomfortable. Omar wasn't just laughing at a man's words, she was laughing at a United States senator in the middle of an official hearing. When she finally caught her breath, Omar leaned forward and said, loud enough for the microphones to catch, "Senator Kennedy, I'm sorry, but your arguments sound like something out of a bad sitcom. I can't take this seriously." The words hung in the air. It was the kind of direct mockery rarely seen in that chamber. Aides scribbled furiously. News producers in the back knew they had struck gold. Omar leaned back in her chair, satisfied, her smirk returning. She thought she had won the moment. But John Kennedy had been underestimated before. He was no stranger to sharp exchanges, no stranger to being laughed at, and certainly no stranger to being underestimated by his opponents. He took a long sip of water, placed his glass down carefully, and then leaned forward toward the microphone. His southern drawl came through slow and deliberate, each word like a knife wrapped in velvet. "Congresswoman," Kennedy began, "I've been laughed at before. I've been laughed at in high school, when I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. I've been laughed at in law school, when professors told me I wasn't cut out for the courtroom. I've even been laughed at in this very chamber, when folks thought I couldn't string 2 sentences together without tripping over myself. But let me tell you something, laughter doesn't make an argument. And mockery doesn't make policy." The room grew still. Omar shifted slightly in her chair, her smirk fading just a little. Kennedy continued, "You say my arguments sound like a bad sitcom. Maybe so. But at least I know the difference between standing up for the people who elected me and auditioning for late-night television. You've spent 5 minutes laughing at me, Congresswoman. Let's see if you can spend 5 seconds explaining why you think taxpayers should foot the bill for programs that don't help the working man or woman in this country." The audience murmured. Omar opened her mouth to speak, but Kennedy held up a hand. No, I've listened to you laugh. Now it's my turn. You see, the trouble with Washington is that too many people think it's a comedy club. They think scoring points on Twitter is the same as governing. They think mocking their opponents is the same as offering real solutions. But I'll tell you what, when that single mom in Baton Rouge can't buy groceries because inflation's eating up her paycheck, she doesn't care if Ilhan Omar laughed for 5 minutes. She cares about whether or not we're actually fixing the problem. Every word was a hammer striking the nail. Omar shifted again, adjusting her microphone. Kennedy's voice grew sharper. "You've built your career, Congresswoman, on tearing down America while enjoying the privileges it gives you. You mock, you sneer, you belittle. But when has that put food on a family's table? When has that kept the lights on for someone working 2 jobs? When has that laughter of yours helped a child learn to read? You say you can't take me seriously, fine. But I'll take the people of this country seriously every single day, whether they laugh at me or not." The crowd in the chamber erupted in murmurs again, some even clapping softly despite the rules. Omar's smirk was gone now, replaced by a tight-lipped expression. Kennedy leaned back, his words still hanging in the air like smoke. What happened next was almost cinematic. Kennedy's response was clipped, edited, and uploaded within minutes by reporters and aides. By the time the hearing ended, the exchange was trending nationwide. Kennedy destroys Omar, read one headline. Senator's scathing response to Omar's mockery goes viral, read another. On social media, the clip spread like wildfire. Some laughed along with Omar, but most saw Kennedy's retort as a decisive blow. Commentators across the spectrum debated the exchange, but the public perception was clear. Kennedy had stood his ground with dignity while Omar had reduced herself to mockery. Within days, Omar's approval ratings began to slide. Local papers in her district questioned her behavior. Editorials that once praised her fiery rhetoric now criticized her for crossing the line into disrespect. Donors pulled back. Primary challengers began lining up, sensing vulnerability. Kennedy, meanwhile, saw his own profile rise, his folksy but razor-sharp takedown replayed on every major network. The moment became a turning point. Omar, once untouchable in her political niche, suddenly found herself on the defensive. Every town hall she held, constituents brought up the laugh. Every interview she gave, reporters asked her to respond to Kennedy's words. She tried to brush it off, tried to spin it as humor, but the damage was done. Kennedy, in his own way, summed it up weeks later during another appearance. "You can laugh at me all you want," he said, "but laughter doesn't pay the bills. Ideas do." Omar's career, while not ending overnight, began a slow, undeniable decline from that point forward. The 5 minutes of laughter that she thought would make her look clever ended up becoming the very thing people remembered most. Not her policies, not her speeches, but her derision in the face of a man who refused to be rattled. And Kennedy. He had turned a moment of mockery into a political triumph, proving once again that sometimes the best way to handle ridicule is not with anger, but with unshakable conviction and words that cut deeper than laughter ever could. In the end, history would remember that day not as a simple exchange in a Senate chamber, but as the day John Kennedy turned 5 minutes of laughter into the undoing of a career built on it.